Imagine a world, right? It's the cusp of the 19th century. Vast oceans, maps still kind of hazy, maybe with here be dragons still lurking in the corners. Communication, it moves at the speed of wind, literally. Travel is dangerous, takes months.
It's hard to even properly picture it now, the sheer scale of the unknown back then.
Yeah.
The limitations were just immense.
Totally. And yet, from that world, this incredibly powerful, surprisingly, well, modern argument emerges. It challenges everything people thought was possible, and maybe even what they owed to, like, a global community.
And that's where William Carey comes in. It wasn't just thinking, it was a blueprint. He was daring to imagine this deeply connected world despite all those limitations.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into this really influential work from 1792 by Carey. It's called An Inquiry into the Obligations of Christians to Use Means for the Conversion of the Heathens. Now, I know the title sounds maybe a bit dusty.
Good academic, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But trust me, it's so much more. This thing is radical. It's a call to global action filled with these startling observations, super detailed plans, and a kind of strategic thinking that honestly feels way ahead of its time.
It really is. So our mission here is to unpack Carey's core arguments.
Oh.
We want to see how he just systematically took apart all the excuses people had for not acting.
And we'll look at his historical overview, how he uses history to show this stuff has been done before.
Then we'll get into his survey of the world as it was then in 1792. A really stark picture, you'll see. It shows the scale of what he saw as the problem.
And finally, the really practical stuff. His incredibly bold, detailed proposals for how people, individuals, and groups could actually make a difference across continents, even back then.
Right. And hopefully we'll see how these 18th century insights might, give us some unexpected perspectives on global understanding, human initiative, even today.
Okay, but first, a quick note on context. This text, it's rooted in a very specific religious and historical time. Our goal here is to understand and impartially present Carey's arguments, the facts he lays out. We're not here to endorse the theology itself.
No, the aim is really to pull out the knowledge, the insights, the methods that shaped what became a really significant global movement. We want to understand what he said, how he argued it, and, well, why it mattered.
Okay, let's get into it. So Carey starts with this huge question right out of the gate, basically. Is Christ's command to go and teach all nations still binding? Or, was that just for the apostles, those original guys with the special gifts?
Was it a limited time offer?
Essentially, yeah. Was it expired? And what's fascinating is how he tackles this. He's not just debating theology points. He's really confronting this ingrained complacency, this way people had of just saying, oh, it's too hard or it's not for us.
Right. He uses logic, history, scripture. It's like a masterclass in challenging inertia.
Yeah.
Whether it's about global missions or any huge challenge you might face today, he's pushing against resignation.
Totally. So the first big objection he deals with is this apostles-only argument. The thinking was, okay, that command was specific. The apostles were extraordinary officers. They had unique gifts, like speaking in tongues.
Things that, well, ordinary ministers in 1792 clearly didn't have.
Yeah.
So the argument went the command couldn't possibly apply to them.
Exactly. But Carey just shreds this. His counter-arguments are so sharp. First, he points out the logical inconsistency. He says, okay, if preaching to all nations was only for apostles, then baptizing must have been only for them too, right? It's part of the same commission.
Good point.
But he says, look around. Pretty much every Christian group back then, except maybe the Quakers, they all practiced baptism universally. So their own actions contradicted their argument.
He's saying you can't have it both ways. If you accept the universality of baptism from that commission, you logically have to accept the universality of the go and teach part too. It's a brilliant internal critique.
It really is. He's holding up a mirror. Then he hits them with historical precedent. He says, okay, if only the apostles had the authority, then what about all those ordinary ministers throughout history who did take the gospel to new places? Were they all acting without authority?
Which would mean figures they revered were basically rogue agents.
Exactly. It makes no sense, Carey argues, especially since God clearly blessed many of those efforts with success in his view. It would be a completely self-defeating position for the church to hold.
It undermines their own history.
Right. And then he brings in the scriptural clincher, as he sees it, the end of the world clause. He quotes Matthew 28:20, where Jesus promises, "Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world."
The promise of divine presence.
Yes. And Carey argues, look, that promise is explicitly perpetual. It doesn't say, I'm with you until the last apostle dies. It says, until the end of the world. So if the promise attached to the command is perpetual.
And the command itself must be perpetual, too. It links the command to every single generation. That's a very strong argument from the text itself.
Definitely lays a strong foundation. But, okay, there were other objections. The second one was about when divine commands do actually stop being binding. And Carey, being logical, acknowledges, yeah, sometimes commands do cease.
Okay, like how?
Well, maybe they're formally repealed, like he argues happened with Jewish ceremonial law, or maybe there are just no subjects left for the command. Like, if there were no poor people left, a law about forgiving their debts wouldn't apply anymore.
Makes sense. Or
Or maybe there's a specific counter-revelation. He uses the example of Paul and Silas being told by the Holy Spirit not to go into Bithynia at that specific time, a divine redirection.
okay, a specific temporary block.
Right. And finally, natural impossibility. Like, Paul couldn't preach in Tahiti because, well, Europeans didn't even know it existed yet.
Right, physically impossible at the time.
But then Carey just turns it all around. He says, okay, none of these apply to the command to reach the nations. It hasn't been repealed. No scripture says so.
And then no subjects argument.
Laughable, basically. He points out that in 1792, the far greater part of the world are still covered with heathen darkness. There were hundreds of millions of people who, in his view, hadn't heard the message. Plenty of subjects.
So that condition doesn't apply at all. What about the counter-revelation?
He says, look, Paul and Silas were just redirected from Bithynia. They weren't told to stop missions altogether. They just went somewhere else. Macedonia, in fact.
Right.
It shows you need to be adaptable, not that you should just give up.
Find another door when one closes.
Exactly. But this next point about natural impossibility, this is where he really goes on the attack against the mindset of his time.
Ah, yes, the wait for providence idea.
Hmm.
People were basically saying, well, if God wants it done, he'll miraculously transport us there or give us the gift of tongues like at Pentecost. A very passive approach.
And Carey is having none of it. He basically says, stop waiting for miracles when you have the means right in front of you. God has given you ships, maps, languages you can learn. Embrace the openings in providence which daily present themselves. Don't expect a chariot of fire when you've got a perfectly good boat.
It's like saying, don't pray for food and then refuse to plant seeds. He saw waiting for the miraculous as just negligence, really.
Yeah.
Using the means available was part of faith for him.
And he uses historical proof, examples his audience couldn't deny. Look at what others have already done. He points to the popish missionary as his term for Catholics who had already gone to far-flung places and overcome huge difficulties.
He's using their rivals' efforts as proof.
Yes. And even more powerfully, the Moravian Brethren. A small Protestant group, but incredibly dedicated. They went to the scorching heat of Abyssinia and the frozen climes of Greenland and Labrador. They dealt with tough languages, savage manners, he calls it, but they did it.
They proved it was possible even in the most extreme environments.
But then comes the killer argument, the one that must have really stung, English traders. He says, look, for the sake of gain, for profit, these merchants overcome all the obstacles you say are insurmountable. They sail dangerous seas, deal with difficult climates, interact with barbarous clans.
They do it for otter skins, for spices.
Right. They even engage in the accursed slave trade on the coasts of Africa, overcoming every barrier for profit. So Carey asks, if people can do all that for money, why can't they do it for faith? For souls.
Oof, that's a direct hit. It proves, he says, the possibility of ministers being introduced there. It's not about possibility, it's about motivation, it's about priorities.
It's just devastatingly effective. If commerce can span the globe, so can the gospel, is his point. Okay, objection 3, prophecy. Some scholars argued that certain prophecies meant the mass conversion of non-Christians wouldn't happen until later, after other specific events. So basically...
It's not God's time yet, so don't bother. A convenient excuse.
Pretty much. Carey says he much doubts this interpretation. He argues, look, if we based our duty on God's secret future plans, we shouldn't even pray for them, which is absurd. But more importantly, he says this objection is just too late.
Too late? How?
Because, he says, the success of the gospel has been very considerable in many places already. Missions were happening, conversions were occurring, even if not on a massive scale yet. The proof was already there. You can't use "it's not time yet" when it's clearly already started.
The facts on the ground contradict the excuse. Good point.
And the final objection, one we still hear echoes of, work enough at home. The idea that, look, there are so many people in our own country who are ignorant or unchurched, as ignorant as the South Sea savages. He quotes them as saying, all our effort should be right here.
A very common sentiment, then and now. Focus on your own backyard first.
And Carey, surprisingly, maybe, he grants the premise. He agrees, yes, the need at home is huge. It demands tenfold diligence. He doesn't dismiss it.
Okay, so how does he counter it then?
He pivots. He says, okay, the need at home is real, but the idea that it ought to supersede all attempts to spread the gospel in foreign parts seems to want proof. There's no logical reason why doing one means you can't do the other.
It's not an either situation for him.
Exactly. And he highlights a crucial difference. People in Britain, he says, have the means of grace. They have Bibles, churches, ministers, but those abroad often have no Bible, no written language, no ministers, no good civil government, none of the advantages.
So the level of need, the absolute lack of any access is different.
Precisely. It's a matter of spiritual poverty being more extreme in those other places. So he concludes this whole section with this passionate plea. Pity, therefore, humanity, and much more, Christianity, call loudly for every possible exertion to introduce the gospel among them. It's not just religious duty, it's basic human compassion. He's left no excuse standing.
He really has systematically taken apart every reason for inaction. It's quite a rhetorical performance.
Okay, so now that Carey has basically demolished the excuses, he wants to show that this isn't some new crazy idea. He takes us on this historical tour, demonstrating that global outreach is woven into the very fabric of Christian history.
Right, he's building the positive case now,
Right.
showing it has been done so it can be done again. He starts naturally right at the beginning Pentecost.
Yeah, that initial explosion. The Spirit comes down, they speak in other languages, Peter preaches, boom, 3,000 converts in one day. For Carey, this isn't just history, it's the model for what's possible. Rapid growth, immediate impact.
But it wasn't smooth sailing, was it? He highlights the challenges too.
Oh, definitely. Immediate opposition from the priests and Sadducees. The apostles get thrown in prison. But then, amazingly, an angel lets them out. They go right back to preaching, get arrested again, hauled before the council, but they leave rejoicing that they were worthy to suffer for the name.
Resilience right from the start.
And the church in Jerusalem grows so fast they have to appoint deacons like Stephen just to handle the practical stuff, the food distribution, so the apostles can focus on prayer and teaching. They're organizing for growth even while facing threats.
And then Stephen's martyrdom.
Yeah.
A terrible event. But Carey sees it as a catalyst, right?
Exactly. It sparks this intense persecution that scatters the believers from Jerusalem, everyone except the apostles, interestingly. But the scattering isn't a defeat. It means they went everywhere preaching the word. Adversity actually spreads the message wider.
A recurring theme for him. And this is where Saul, the persecutor, enters the picture, initially on the wrong side.
Yeah, hunting down Christians. But then his dramatic conversion on the road to Damascus, he flips completely, starts preaching immediately, and then finds himself facing the same persecution, having to escape Damascus in a basket. For Carey, it's this powerful story of total transformation and commitment.
The ultimate example of dedication.
Right.
And Carey points to other expansions too, right? Beyond Jerusalem.
Yes, Philip going to Samaria, having great success there, and the conversion of the Ethiopian eunuch on the road to Gaza, a really key moment, showing the message crossing cultural and geographic boundaries early on, reaching into Africa.
These are early signs of the universal potential he's emphasizing.
And Peter's ministry expands too, healing Aeneas and Lydda, raising Tabitha in Joppa miracles leading to more conversions. But the crucial moment for Carey is Peter's vision about Cornelius, the Roman centurion.
Ah, the sheet coming down from heaven with the animals.
Right. That vision, Carey argues, is what revealed to Peter definitively that the message was for all nations, not just Jews. It broke down that barrier, a divine command to go global.
A foundational moment for the whole enterprise. And around the same time, others who fled Jerusalem ended up in Antioch, Syria.
And started preaching to Greeks there, Gentiles.
Yeah.
Big success again. So Barnabas gets sent from Jerusalem, then he goes and gets Paul, and together they build up the church in Antioch. It becomes this major hub, a launching pad for missions to the wider world. Strategy in action.
Which leads us directly into Paul's famous missionary journeys. Carey sees these as like the textbook example of strategic global outreach.
Totally. That first journey with Barnabas into Asia Minor and Cyprus, Carey calls it the first attack on the heathen world. and they face problems right away. John Mark leaves them.
Shows the human element, the difficulties involved.
Exactly, but they press on. They preach to Jews first in the synagogues, then turn to the Gentiles. They face wildly different reactions. Sometimes people try to worship them. Other times they get violently rejected. Paul gets stoned and left for dead.
Incredible extremes.
But they establish churches, appoint elders, and return to Antioch to report how God had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. It's this cycle. Go out, face challenges, establish communities, report back, strengthen.
A model for organized effort. Then the second journey.
This time with Silas and Timothy, after Paul and Barnabas had that sharp disagreement, Paul heads west. And here we see that divine redirection again. The Holy Spirit forbids them from going into Asia Minor or Bithynia.
So sad.
They end up in Troas, and Paul has the vision of the man from Macedonia saying, "Come over and help us." So off they go to Europe.
Again, not a no to mission, just to go this way instead.
Right.
Guiding them to a whole new continent.
Right. Leads them to Philippi Lydia's conversion by the river. Then the jailer and his family converted after an earthquake, even while Paul and Silas are in prison. Carey loves this. Even imprisonment advances the cause.
Turning setbacks into victories.
They continue through Thessalonica, Berea, where the people are praised for checking Paul's teaching against the scriptures.
A model of discernment.
Then Athens, Corinth. Facing constant opposition, especially from some Jewish groups, but Paul gets that promise in Corinth, "I am with thee, I have much people in this city." And Carey says Paul planted churches that shone like lights for ages. Long-term impact.
And the third journey, more strengthening, right?
Yeah, revisiting churches, but also a long, significant stay in Ephesus, 2 years teaching daily in the school of Tyrannus. Huge impact, all. Heard the word. Even magicians convert and burn their magic books. Radical transformation.
And the final journey to Rome as a prisoner.
Yes, Paul appeals to Caesar, which gets him sent to Rome. Another example for Carey of how even secular systems can end up serving God's purpose. Dangerous sea voyage, shipwreck on Malta where Paul performs miracles.
Even the journey itself becomes a mission field.
Exactly. He finally gets to Rome, meets with Jewish leaders. Some believe, some don't. So he turns to the Gentiles, preaching openly, no man forbidding him, even under house arrest. The message penetrates the heart of the empire despite the chains.
An incredible story of perseverance. But Carey doesn't stop with Acts, does he?
No, he casts the net wider. He lists traditions about where other apostles and early figures preached Peter in Babylon, maybe even Paul reaching Spain or Britain, Andrew to the Scythians, Thomas to India. He wants to paint a picture of truly global, immediate expansion.
Showing the immense scale of that first wave.
And he backs it up with quotes from respected historical sources, stuff his readers would know. Pliny the Younger, a Roman governor, writing in the early 2nd century about how Christianity had spread through whole countries, not just cities.
External validation.
Justin Martyr, mid-2nd century, saying there's basically no group of people on earth, even nomadic tribes like Sarmatians and Sinites, where prayers aren't offered in Christ's name. Irenaeus, around 170 AD, talking about churches in Germany, Spain, France, Egypt.
Wow, really widespread by then.
And Tertullian, around 190 AD, gives this huge list of nations, including parts of Britain the Romans couldn't even conquer, but the gospel had reached. He even boasts that if the authorities tried to persecute all the Christians in Carthage, the city would be decimated.
Shows their numbers and confidence.
Right. Carey's point through all this history is the resilience. He notes that even Diocletian's brutal empire-wide persecution for 10 years couldn't stamp out Christianity, if they could overcome all that back then.
Why can't we overcome our obstacles now? It's a powerful historical argument for possibility.
Exactly. But then Carey introduces a twist, a paradox. He acknowledges that when emperors like Constantine made Christianity legal, even favored it, yes, a very great work of God was carried on, but
there's his downside.
Yeah. That ease and affluence, he says, served to introduce a flood of corruption. This eventually led to what he calls the whole system of popery. He sees it almost like a countermove by Satan, co-opting the movement's success, bringing in darkness to seat human authority over conscience.
So success itself brought new dangers. A cautionary tale.
And during this period, which he views negatively, missionary efforts did continue. He mentions figures like Frumentius in India, a Christian woman captive in Iberia, modern Georgia, influencing the nation, Moses sent to the Saracens, but...
A compulsive part crept in, didn't it?
Yes. He points to rulers like Charlemagne, conquering pagan nations and forcing conversion by the sword. Or the Spanish in South America, The Portuguese in Asia, using military power and colonial domination to impose Christianity.
Not exactly winning hearts and minds.
No. Carey is highly critical. He talks about blind zeal, gross superstition, and infamous cruelties. He concludes that often, during this era, the professors of Christianity needed conversion as much as the heathen world. He's drawing a sharp line between genuine faith and forced compliance.
A crucial distinction for his argument about how missions should be done. So things look pretty bleak in his historical view for a while.
They did. But then he sees signs of renewal, the seeds of the Reformation. He mentions groups like the Waldensians in the Piedmont valleys keeping faith alive through dark times. Then figures like Wycliffe in England in the 1300s translating the Bible, followed by Huss and Jerome in Bohemia, sparks lighting up across Europe.
Laying the groundwork.
Leading, of course, to the big Reformation. Luther, Calvin, others challenging the established system, leading nations to cast off the yoke of popery, as he puts it, and embrace what they saw as a purer gospel.
A return to origins, in his view.
And this renewed zeal crosses the Atlantic. Persecution in England drives pious people to America in 1620, establishing churches that grew rapidly. This becomes a new center for outreach.
And he highlights specific examples from this newer era, right? People who inspire him.
Definitely. John Eliot, working among Native Americans in New England from 1632, great success, planting churches, training Native leaders, a key point for Carey, empowering locals. Then David Brainerd, about a century later, also working with Native Americans, known for his intense dedication and seeing remarkable conversions despite hardships.
Real heroes of the faith for Carey.
And initiatives by others, too. The Danish sending Ziegenbalg to India in 1706. The Dutch East India Company, interestingly, a trading company, setting up churches and seminaries in places like Batavia, Jakarta, the Spice Islands, even Formosa, Taiwan, shows organized, large-scale efforts were happening.
Even if sometimes mixed with commerce, which he later critiques.
Right. But the group he holds up as the modern ideal, the Moravian Brethren, he calls their efforts unequaled. Greenland, Labrador, West Indies, Abyssinia. Extreme climates, difficult cultures, but they went and they stayed. Incredible resilience.
They embodied the dedication he was calling for.
And finally, he mentions John Wesley's work in the West Indies among enslaved Africans and Caribs, happening right around Carey's own time, with encouraging results. So this whole historical sweep, it's designed to prove one thing. Global outreach is not impossible. It's commanded, it's been done, sometimes imperfectly, but it can be done. History is his evidence.
He's built a really strong case from history. Okay, so after establishing the duty and the historical possibility, Carey then brings it home. He gives this stark, detailed picture of the world right then in 1792. What does it actually look like?
Yeah, this is where he really lays out the scale of the challenge. He doesn't just talk in generalities, he uses numbers. He estimates the total world population at around 731 million.
Okay, and how did he break that down religiously?
Well, this is the shocking part for his audience. He calculates that a massive 420 million people, well over half the planet, were what he termed pagans, living, in his view, in heathen darkness.
420 million. That's a staggering number.
It really is. And he emphasizes many of these people had no written language, no Bibles, no true government as he saw it, none of the spiritual advantages people in Britain had. He's painting a picture of vast, unmet need.
Where were these populations mainly located, according to him?
He lists huge regions, middle and back parts of North America, the inland parts of South America, the South Sea Islands, New Holland, Australia, New Zealand, New Guinea, plus Great Tartary, Siberia, Samoshetia, vast areas of Asia, and the greatest part of Africa, the island of Madagascar. It's truly global in scope.
He's basically saying, look at the map. Most of it is untouched by the gospel. What about other groups?
He estimates about 130 million Mahometans or Muslims. Then the Christian groups are comparatively small. 100 million Catholics, 44 million Protestants, his own broad category, 30 million in the Greek and Armenian churches, and about 7 million Jews scattered around the world.
So if you add up the non-Christian groups, pagans, Muslims, Jews, it vastly outweighs the number of Christians, especially Protestants, in his calculation.
Massively. That's the core of his statistical argument. He's showing his readers the sheer imbalance, the enormous task ahead if they take the commission seriously.
And what did he say about the condition of these pagan societies? Did he elaborate?
He did, and it's quite graphic, designed to evoke pity and urgency. He mentions reports from explorers like Captain Cook citing cannibalism among New Zealanders and some North American groups. He says human sacrifices are also very frequently offered. He describes them generally as poor, barbarous, naked pagans, lacking both civilization and true religion in his eyes.
It's a stark portrayal, certainly reflecting the perspectives and prejudices of his time, but aimed at motivating action.
Exactly. But, and this is really important, he adds a crucial nuance. Despite calling them barbarous, he insists they are as capable of knowledge as we are. He says they often show uncommon genius and tractableness, meaning they're intelligent and teachable.
That's a key point. He
Yeah.
doesn't write them off as inherently inferior.
No. And he even speculates that many of the barbarities might stem from being provoked or mistreated, real or supposed affront, suggesting they might be acts of self-defense rather than just innate savagery. This avoids making them seem irredeemable and frames them as people worth reaching, people capable of change.
A more humane perspective than some might have held then. What about regions that did have written languages but weren't Christian in his view?
He mentions places like the East Indies, China, Japan. He's particularly critical of the Jesuit missions in China. He claims they compromise too much, aiming just to obtain their good opinion, even allowing converts to still honor Confucius. He blames their ambitious intrigues for getting the missions eventually suppressed.
A cautionary tale for him about syncretism and political maneuvering in missions. Compromise leads to failure.
Right. And he also brings up a really painful point, a self-critique of Europe. He calls it a melancholy fact that often, wherever Europeans went, their vices actually made the religious situation worse for the local people.
The hypocrisy of colonialism, bringing disease, exploitation, and immorality alongside any attempts at bringing religion.
Precisely. He's acknowledging the often negative impact of European contact, even as he's advocating for a specific kind of religious outreach. He's not blind to the ethical problems of his own society's global expansion.
That's an important piece of self-awareness. How did he view the Mohammedan world?
He notes the divisions, like the animosity between Persian Shias, Hali sect, and Turkish Sunnis. He describes some African Muslims, particularly Arabs, as ignorant and living by depredations, raiding. Again, reflecting common European views of the time focused on perceived social issues.
Okay, but what about the state of Christian lands? Do they get off lightly?
Not at all. This is maybe the most surprising and provocative part of his survey. He basically says that a very great degree of ignorance and immorality abounds amongst them, meaning within Christendom itself.
So the home front wasn't exactly spiritually healthy either, in his view.
Far from it. He claims Greek and Armenian Christians living under Muslim rule were often more ignorant and vicious than the Mohammedans themselves. He gives a shocking example of Georgian Christians selling their neighbors, even their own children, into slavery. He says Turks distrusted Greek converts to Islam because the Greeks were known for dissimulation and hypocrisy.
Wow, scathing criticism of fellow Christians.
And it continues. Papists, Catholics, are in general ignorant of divine things and very vicious. Then he turns to his own Protestant context. Nor did the bulk of the Church of England much exceed them either in knowledge or holiness. Dissenters of all types have many errors and much looseness of conduct. Lutherans in Denmark, about the same as the English clergy.
He spares no one. A truly bleak picture across the board.
His overall conclusion. The face of most Christian countries presents a dreadful scene of ignorance, hypocrisy, and profligacy. He even notes that the core truths of the gospel are being attacked from within these so-called Christian nations.
So this survey isn't just about the heathen world. It's a profound critique of the spiritual state of Europe as well. The need is everywhere.
Exactly. It serves a dual purpose, highlighting the vast need abroad, but also shaking up complacency at home by showing the deep problems within Christianity. It all leads to his final point in this section. All these things, he says, the state of the whole world, are loud calls to Christians, and especially to ministers, to exert themselves to the utmost in their several spheres of action and to try to enlarge them as much as possible. The survey isn't just data. It's a call to arms. He's shown the need. Now he's going to show the way.
Okay, this is where Carey really shifts gears, isn't it? From diagnosis to prescription. He's not just saying we should do something. He's saying, here's how we can do something.
Exactly. This section, the practicability of something more being done, is where he gets incredibly practical, almost like a project manager laying out a plan. He takes all those perceived obstacles, distance, danger, language, and offers concrete solutions.
Systematically dismantling the insurmountable. He sees them as perceived barriers, not actual impossibilities. What's the first one he tackles?
Distance. He basically says, look, this is no longer an excuse. Maybe it was centuries ago, but now we have the mariner's compass, Sea travel is much more certain, predictable. Technology has shrunk the world in a sense.
The excuse of sheer physical distance is weakening.
Right. And he sees the fact that trading companies already go to these supposedly remote, barbarian places as a providential invitation. If they can get there for trade, we can get there for the gospel. And recent explorations, discovering new lands, that should spark pity and action, not fear.
He even finds a biblical link, doesn't he? With the ships of Tarshish.
Yes. Isaiah 60.9. He interprets those trading ships as a sign that commerce itself will eventually subserve the spread of the gospel. He sees navigation, trade routes, even wealth generated by commerce as potential tools God will use. It's quite forward-thinking, leveraging existing global infrastructure for a different purpose.
Identifying resources already in place. Okay, what's the next impediment?
Uncivilized living. The argument that these people are just too savage or primitive to reach, or that living among them would be too difficult. Carey dismisses this as an excuse for those whose love of ease renders them unwilling to expose themselves to inconveniences.
A direct challenge to comfort seeking.
He points out it wasn't an objection for the apostles. They went to the barbarous Germans, Gauls, Britons. He cites Tertullian again, the gospel conquered parts of Britain the Roman armies couldn't. Shows the message itself has power, regardless of the cultural level.
And he uses more recent examples too, right? Like Eliot and Brainerd.
Exactly. Their work with Native Americans showed that the gospel could actually lead to civilization, transforming lives and communities. And then he delivers that killer analogy again.
The otter skins.
Yeah. It only requires that we should have as much love to the souls of our fellow creatures as they have for the profits arising from a few otter skins. Just brutally effective. If traders endure hardship for fur, surely Christians can endure hardship for souls.
He completely flips the argument. The uncivilized state isn't a barrier, it's the reason to go.
Precisely. How can you hear about people living in ignorance and barbarism without laws, arts, sciences, or the gospel and not act? He argues the gospel is the most effective way to bring civilization, to make them useful members of society. He even envisions producing able divines from people currently seen as scarcely human. It's incredibly optimistic about human potential through faith.
A powerful counter-narrative to simply dismissing people as savages.
Okay, impediment number 3. This must be a big one. Danger of being killed. He doesn't downplay this. He admits, yes, missionaries must put his life in his hand. They can't be ruled by fear or self-preservation.
Acknowledges the real risk.
But he frames it as a necessary risk, justified by the goodness of the cause, the duty involved, and the perishing state of those they're trying to reach. He points to Paul and Barnabas being commended for hazarding their lives, while John Mark was criticized for his timidity. It's an appeal to courage and self-sacrifice.
But he also offers some reassurance, doesn't he, based on his view of savages?
Yes, this is fascinating. He reiterates his belief that most barbarities committed by indigenous peoples were actually acts of self-defense due to mistreatment or misunderstanding, real or supposed affront. He argues figures like Eliot, Brainerd, and the Moravians were very seldom molested.
So the danger might be exaggerated, or at least partially caused by the bad behavior of other Europeans?
That's his implication. He suggests that indigenous people often showed a willingness to hear the word, and their main hatred of Christianity stemmed from the vices of nominal Christians, the hypocrisy and cruelty they saw from traders and colonizers. So if missionaries lived differently, with integrity and kindness, the danger would be significantly reduced.
Puts the onus on the missionary's character and behavior. Makes sense. What's the fourth obstacle?
Difficulty of procuring necessaries of life. Basically, how will they survive? Food, shelter, basic needs in a strange land. Carey says, well, they can largely subsist upon such as the natives subsist upon themselves. It requires adapting.
Living like the locals, essentially.
Yes. And he ties this into the nature of the ministerial calling. A minister is not his own, totally devoted, ready to give up comfort, endure suffering. He says they should expect hardship, being hated, maybe imprisoned, dealing with barbarians of uncouth speech, poor food, hunger, hard work. That's the apostolic model.
A very high bar for commitment, almost monastic in its self-denial.
It is. And he poses that really challenging question again. Are ministers justified in staying here in comfortable Britain while so many are perishing without means of grace in other lands? The commission demands they venture all.
Wow. And this leads him into very specific practical planning, right? Logistics.
Yes. This is amazing for 1792. He lays out a detailed plan. First, a team approach. Don't go alone. Send two at least, preferably married, for support.
Safety in numbers and mutual encouragement.
And crucially, they should be accompanied by support staff, two or more other persons with their wives and families, whose only job is providing practical needs, farming, fishing, building, making tools.
A dedicated logistics team. That's incredibly forward-thinking,
Yeah.
recognizing it's not just about the preacher.
Exactly. It's about creating a sustainable community. Which leads to his next point, self-sufficiency. He proposes they cultivate a little spot of ground just for their support, grow their own food.
Like a small pioneer settlement.
Right. This drastically cuts costs, he argues. The first expense of getting them there and setting them up is basically the whole expense because they become self-maintaining after the first harvest. They'd need minimal supplies, a few tools, seeds, maybe a cow and bull. It makes the whole enterprise vastly more scalable and less dependent on unreliable funding from home.
It's essentially a model for sustainable development,
Yeah.
applied to missions. Really innovative. Okay, final obstacle.
Unintelligibility of languages. The communication barrier. Carey is pragmatic. Use interpreters temporarily if you can find them, if not. Well, missionaries need patience and must mingle with the people till they have learned so much of their language.
Immersion learning.
Yeah, he downplays the difficulty, saying it requires no very extraordinary talents to learn a language in a year or two at most. He's basically saying it's learnable, just put in the effort.
He also has specific ideas about the kind of person needed for this, doesn't he?
Oh yes, the missionary profile is key. They must be people of great piety, prudence, courage, and forbearance, rock-solid theology, undoubted orthodoxy, wholehearted commitment, willing to endure harsh climates and basic living conditions. He knew it demanded exceptional character.
And how should they start once they arrive?
Build relationships first. Provide practical help, clothing, tools, fishing gear, things the local people actually need and value. First task. Learn the language, cultivate friendship by all lawful means, convince people you're there for their good, not to exploit them.
Building trust is paramount.
Absolutely. He stresses humility, very careful not to resent injuries, don't think highly of themselves so as to despise the poor heathens. Cultural sensitivity, essentially. Then the core work, doing them good, teaching, exhorting, correcting patiently, tireless service.
And reliance on divine help.
Above all, he says, must be instant in prayer for the effusion of the Holy Spirit. Human effort isn't enough. And he also suggests empowering locals, encouraging appearances of gifts among converts because their understanding of language and culture, plus their changed lives, would be incredibly persuasive.
A vision for indigenous leadership eventually taking over.
Exactly. So after addressing all these impediments with such practical detail, his conclusion is firm. With the right people and the right approach, it is not impracticable. He hasn't just argued why it should be done, but how it realistically could be done.
It's a comprehensive and remarkably practical blueprint for action. So, having established the duty, the possibility, and the practical methods, what does Carey say is the immediate responsibility for Christians back home?
Right, he brings it back to his readers. If his arguments hold up, then there's a clear duty for all Christians to get involved. It's not just for a few specialists, it's a collective responsibility.
They need to heartily concur with God, as he puts it, align their own interests with this bigger global purpose.
Precisely. Your personal purpose should connect with this grand design, and he outlines specific means, concrete actions people can take. First and foremost,
Fervent and united prayer. He stresses this above all else. Without the influence of the Holy Spirit, all the planning, all the effort is ineffectual. He quotes Zechariah, "Not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit."
So human effort is essential, but divine enablement is critical. It starts with dependence on God.
And he connects this prayer to prophecy, too, suggesting that if Christians truly unite in universal conjunction and fervent prayer, it will lead to a great outpouring of the Spirit, purifying the church and overcoming obstacles like idolatrous prejudices. Prayer isn't passive, it's causative for him.
He even sees evidence of answered prayer already happening around him. He mentions monthly prayer meetings for the success of the gospel that he and his associates held. He believes that even if their prayers felt unimportunate and feeble, God had been answering them in a measure.
What kind of answers did he see?
Things like churches growing, theological debates becoming clearer in his view, new doors opening to preach, the spread of civil and religious liberty, even a decline in the influence of popery. He saw tangible results flowing from collective prayer.
He also mentions the anti-slavery movement, doesn't he, as connected to this?
Yes. He calls the effort in Parliament to abolish the inhuman slave trade a noble effort. Even though it failed initially, it led to the praiseworthy effort to establish a free settlement for former slaves at Sierra Leone. He sees this as offering potential not just for fair trade and civilization, but also for introducing the gospel. It's all interconnected in his mind: social justice, prayer, mission.
And these positive signs are loud calls for Christians to be even more engaged, more concerned.
Exactly, to show greater solicitude. And he makes a really important point about prayer and unity in a time when Christian denominations were often at odds.
Prayer was the one thing they could all do together.
Yes. He says prayer is perhaps the only thing in which Christians of all denominations can cordially and unreservedly unite. He envisions the whole body of believers, animated by one soul, through prayer, creating this powerful, unified spiritual force for the mission.
A vision for overcoming division through shared purpose. But prayer isn't enough on its own, is it?
No way. Carey is clear. We must not be contented, however, with praying without exerting ourselves in the use of means. Prayer fuels action. It doesn't replace it. This is where active engagement comes in. Christians need to be as strategic and diligent as
The children of this world, the business people. His famous analogy.
Yes, the trading company analogy. It's so powerful. He paints this picture of a trading company getting its charter. What do? They push to the utmost limits. They pick the best people, gather resources. They use every effort, take risks, cast their bread upon the waters, build relationships, cross dangerous seas, endure harsh climates, enter barbarous nations, suffer hardships.
They're totally committed. Their minds are filled with anxiety and suspense until the ships return with the profits.
Their souls enter into the spirit of the project, he says. Their happiness depends on its success. And then he applies it directly to Christians. You have a divine charter, far greater promises, and returns infinitely superior to mere financial gain. So why aren't you acting with the same might?
Ouch. It's a direct challenge to their level of commitment and priorities. If merchants risk everything for wealth, shouldn't believers risk everything for what Carey saw as eternal souls?
It's incredibly provocative, and this leads him to his next practical step: formation of a society or committee. If you're going to act like a company, you need organization.
Moving beyond individual zeal to coordinated effort.
Right. He suggests a group of serious Christians, ministers, and private persons form a society. They need clear rules for planning, selecting missionaries, checking for piety, perseverance, orthodoxy, the right character, and managing the finances.
A proper organizational structure. What would this committee actually do?
Gather information about potential mission fields, receive donations, vet potential missionaries, very carefully checking their character and abilities, provide them with the necessary supplies, basically handle the logistics and oversight.
And he includes a warning here too, right? About missionary motives.
A crucial one, based on history. Pay great attention to the views of those who undertake this work. He points back to those Dutch East India Company missions that got corrupted because people went for money, temporal gain, not ministry. They ended up with indolent or profligate persons, and the mission failed. Integrity is paramount.
The why matters as much as the what. Who did he suggest should form these societies?
Well, he specifically suggests his own group, the particular Baptist denomination, should start one. But immediately he broadens it. He says he wishes with all my heart that everyone who loves Christ would get involved somehow.
So ideally ecumenical, but practically maybe denominational.
Yeah, he pragmatically suggests that in a divided state of Christendom, separate denominational societies might be better to avoid private discords hindering the public work. Get the job done, even if you have to do it in parallel tracks. The mission comes first.
Practical realism. Okay, prayer, action, organization. What about the resources? Money.
Ah, yes. Contributions for expenses. Money will doubtless be wanting, he says bluntly. You can't do this without funding. He calls on the wealthy to embark a portion of that wealth.
Tapping into philanthropy.
But it's not just for the rich. He suggests people of moderate circumstances could adopt the practice of tithing, giving a tenth of their annual increase. He argues this ancient practice could fund home ministry, local outreach, and foreign missions. It makes it sustainable for everyone.
A systematic approach to giving.
And he gets even more grassroots. He suggests congregations start collecting subscriptions of 1 penny or more per week. Just think, that simple method, everyone chipping in a tiny amount regularly, could generate significant funds for both local work and sending people abroad.
The power of collective small contributions. That became huge later on.
It did. And he has that really creative idea linked to the anti-slavery movement again. People boycotting slave-produced West India sugar. we're saving maybe 6 pence or a shilling a week. Carey says, why not channel that saving or part of it into funding missions?
Wow. Connecting consumer ethics directly to mission funding. Turn your protest into positive action.
Isn't that brilliant? His overall point on funding is, we have only to keep the end in view and have our hearts thoroughly engaged, and means will not be very difficult. If the passion and commitment are there, you'll find a way to fund it.
The will finds the way.
Okay.
So after all this practical effort, what's the ultimate motivation? The reward.
For Carey, it's fundamentally about eternal perspective, laying up treasure in heaven. He talks about the immense treasure and harvest awaiting people like Paul or Eliot or Brainerd, who gave their lives to this work. Their earthly sacrifice translates into heavenly reward.
A transcendent motivation beyond earthly success or failure.
He paints this picture. What a heaven will it be to see the many myriads of poor heathens who by their labors have been brought to the knowledge of God, seeing the fruit of your efforts in eternity.
That's the ultimate payoff he envisions.
Yes. He concludes, surely a crown of rejoicing like this is worth aspiring to. Surely it is worthwhile to lay ourselves out with all our might in promoting the cause and kingdom of Christ. It's a final, powerful appeal that ties all the practical exertion back to an ultimate spiritual purpose.
What a comprehensive vision. He really covered all the bases: theological, historical, practical, financial, motivational.
Absolutely. Carey's inquiry, when you really dive into it, it's this incredible blend, isn't it? Fervent prayer, deep reliance on God, but also this relentless, practical, almost entrepreneurial action. He saw a world needing transformation, and he believed it could happen not through magic, but through dedicated people, organized effort, meticulous planning, and unwavering faith.
It really is striking how detailed his plans were. Financing, staffing, self-sufficiency models, the day-to-day practicalities of living abroad, all thought through in an 18th century context, without any of our modern communication or travel. It just showcases this enduring human ability to organize, strategize, and sacrifice for something seen as a greater good. It kind of makes you wonder if sometimes we lack the will more than the means.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It really does make you think. If William Carey, back in 1792, looking out at a world that was still largely unknown, dangerous, incredibly disconnected, if he could see past all those seemingly insurmountable obstacles and instead see this vast potential for human and divine action.
What opportunities might we be missing today?
Exactly. In our world, which is so interconnected technologically, yet still so deeply divided in other ways, maybe the biggest barriers aren't really distance or danger or even resources anymore. Maybe sometimes it's just a failure of imagination. Or maybe just the willingness to step outside our comfort zones to apply that same kind of focused, determined energy that Carey called for to the big challenges we face now.
Perhaps that 18th century call to audacious, practical, faith-fueled action still has a lot to teach us, something to definitely mull over.